There are a lot of plot holes in Legacies, which is kind of expected seeing as it's the third show in a fictional universe. However, Legacies not only contradict lore that was already pre-established in the Vampire Diaries and the originals, it also contradicts lore that's already pre-established in its own show, sometimes in the exact same season. Like with the Vampire Diaries and the originals, I managed to narrow it down to 10 plot holes. However, the struggle that I had with the Vampire Diaries and the originals was just trying to find 10 plot holes in the shows. However, with Legacies, the struggle that I actually had was trying to narrow it down to 10. So join me as I go through the 10 biggest plot holes in Legacies.
Well, I had a crush on Josie for a week when we were 14.
Read my lips. The two of you are never happening.
This is probably the most obvious one because it is the easiest thing to notice, especially when everyone else is aging except for Hope. Hope is the only character that was never stated to ever have a birthday. And this isn't even just a problem for Legacies. The originals also had the same problem. They for some reason don't know how to work out Hope's birthday that actually aligned with the pre-establishing lore. And with Legacies, the reason why they didn't likely do that is because they probably thought that Hope being much older than the twins make her a lot less impressive. And they basically tried to make the twins and Hope around the same age, which doesn't make sense because the twins are born 2 years after Hope, seeing as it was explicitly stated in season 3 of the originals that Hope is 2 years old. And the twins were born in season 3 of the originals, although not in the originals, but in the Vampire Diaries. But based on the fact that Stefan left Mystic Falls just before the twins were born and ended up in New Orleans in season 3 of the originals, shows that the twins were born in season 3 of the originals, meaning that Hope should be about 2 years older than the twins. And the twins were 15 at the start of the show and 17 at the end of the show, meaning that Hope should be about 19 years of age. So when Hope said that she had a crush on Josie when we were 13, that makes no sense, because there's no way both of them were somehow 13 at the exact same time, because again, Hope is 2 years older than them.
Is there a plan B? Please tell me there's a plan B.
Turn around.
Why?
Because plan B involves me getting naked.
What?
I have to draw it away from you.
Why does that require nudity?
Because this monster feeds on werewolves.
But you're a witch. A lying witch.
This is also a very small one, and it doesn't really have as much of an impact in terms of the show in general, as in the canon of the show in general. It's just a very small and minor detail that every single member of the Labanere bloodline should possess, especially Hope, seeing as we actually seen it on her back, and I'm of course referring to her birthmark. This is how Klaus was able to notice that Haley was part of the Labanere bloodline. This is how we also noticed that the Hollow was also part of the Labanere bloodline. But in that scene, Hope's birthmark was missing.
Rise and shine, brother vampire. Talk to me like the rain, and I will lie here and listen.
You're a poet.
Nah, that's Tennessee Williams, bruh. But tell me what I want to hear, and there's more where that came from.
Sebastian's entire existence, to the point in which nobody actually knew he was in the Salvatore compound, is a gigantic plot hole. One, because there is no way he was there for that long and no one ever noticed he was actually there. He was in the mill, a mill that was explicitly stated to be owned by Stefan, meaning that he was either there for that long and nobody noticed, or he was moved there and still nobody noticed. But the biggest and most egregious one is the fact that he's not even supposed to be alive. If he has been there for that long, that would mean that he was also still there in season 6 in Mystic Falls, when they actually had an anti-magic barrier, a barrier that strips you of your immortality. How exactly was he still alive? The anti-magic barrier eventually will kill you after it strips away your vampirism. Some might try to excuse this by saying that he was underground, but vampires were underground in season 5 and they were also dying. Unless he was moved afterwards, which makes no sense without the Salvatores actually noticing, or Caroline noticing, or Alaric noticing, or any of the main characters in Vampire Diaries even noticing. So either way, it doesn't make sense that he was actually there, and most definitely it doesn't make sense that he's actually still alive.
I'm so sorry.
Josie, what did you do?
I fixed her.
To be honest, the stuff with dark magic has just been terrible throughout the entirety of the Vampire Diaries universe because the lore around it constantly get contradicted. However, it has never gone to the point in which it actually causes split personality. Like, since when? Especially a split personality that could actually be summoned. That has never happened before because there was no law to actually support this. Dark magic is just a form of magic that contradicts the laws of nature. How exactly did that happen to Josie but it didn't happen to Bonnie? The reason why Josie actually had a split personality was because she was subduing the part that was actually making her stronger, which is the dark side of her. Why didn't she have a split personality? Same thing with Freya as well. Why didn't Freya have a split personality? Why didn't Vincent have a split personality? Why didn't Davina have a split personality? Why is it only Josie?
Broke his sire bond. You won't have to deal with him anymore.
It's easier said than done. Besides, I won't know if it's broken for sure till I test it.
Wait, I thought that's why you were coming back. Because you said you felt different.
I do feel different. I feel freer. Way more myself. All I know is I just turned about 100 times in the Appalachian Mountains. If I can get through that, I can get through anything.
As much as I hate what you're doing right now, I still love you.
Then prove it. Kill her.
If you wish to kill me, child, don't make a mess of it.
You missed. I know her heart's tiny, but it's a couple of inches over.
I know. I meant to. Which means I broke the sire bond.
How was it that it was actually that easy for Lizzie to actually break the sire bond? If it was that easy, why didn't Tyler do that? Like, people would be saying that Lizzie is mentally strong, that's why she was able to easily break the sire bond. No, she isn't. She's a mental train wreck. You're telling me that Lizzie, just because she was told to do something that she doesn't want to do, she was somehow still able to easily break the sire bond just from her will alone? And none of Klaus's hybrids couldn't, especially Tyler? You're telling me Tyler didn't actually break the sire bond from sheer will alone after he was asked by Klaus to bite his girlfriend, the woman that he loves. He couldn't break it for someone that he loves, someone that he's known since he was a child, somebody that he knows would definitely die to his bite, seeing as a werewolf bite is lethal to a vampire. And he didn't break the sire bond for her, but for some reason Lizzie was able to break the sire bond for Aurora, somebody that she doesn't even know that well. Like, for Tyler to actually break his sire bond, he had to transform like 100 times. It is near impossible to actually do it at will because it is mentally ingrained into your brain that you are 100% gratitude to your sire. And with that gratitude, you have to obey your sire at every turn, no matter what they ask you to do, because you are very much thankful to them. And that's your way of thanking them. It is very stupid, but that's the law that they actually created for the sire bond. And with vampires is when you are in love with a vampire that eventually turns you. Once you actually become a vampire, you automatically sire bonded to them. Lizzie, however, fits the former, and she was able to break it from sheer will alone, something that's almost impossible to do, because if it was that easy, then Tyler would have done it.
You offered me protection once, and for the first time, we need it.
I had never seen that look on his face before, so it took me a minute to figure out what it was. My all-powerful father was afraid.
What does an omnipotent deity fear?
Gods are only as powerful as people's belief in them, which had diminished over the years. And then the ultimate death sentence for a god came along. A creature that could make the world forget you ever existed.
This is going to be a 2-for-1 special. The first one being, why exactly did Ken actually believe that Malivor's memory wipe ability would actually work on him or work on any other god? It was heavily implied by Jen that the reason why Ken actually went into hiding and actually entrusted her help in order to put them in their coffins is because of the memory wipe ability. Which makes no sense, because if Malivore had consumed other gods before, why would he believe that it actually still works? Because he would have immediately noticed that he still remembers those gods, because the ability doesn't actually work on gods. If that wasn't a reason, why did Jen believe that was a reason? Because it wouldn't make sense, because she also knows that that ability doesn't work on gods, because she remembers Ben.
They painted you as a coward and a tyrant, but you're nothing of the sort.
I was a father, determined to protect his family from Malivore. At least the ones he hadn't already consumed.
And secondly, where the hell did the other gods go? Because Ken said Malivore absorbed other gods, which makes no sense, because everyone Malivore absorbed was actually either released back onto Earth or was sent straight to Limbo. And for some reason, none of them were gods. Nobody mentioned the gods being sent to Limbo. Landon was also immediately sent to Limbo, meaning that if there were actually gods there, Landon would have actually noticed and actually pointed it out to Hope or Alaric or any of his allies or friends. And for some reason he didn't, meaning that they weren't actually there, meaning that they must have been on Earth, which makes no sense because nobody mentioned them, and Ken didn't even try to locate them.
They spelled the creature to have an insatiable hunger, but their spell also made it unable to harm witches, werewolves, or vampires.
When the dragons in human form returned to collect the treasure from all the villages they had attacked, it was waiting for them. It took them. It consumed them.
To their surprise, the creature was more effective than they could have dreamed. After the dragons were gone, it kept eating every monster it could, swallowing them into an endless space inside itself.
Speaking of Malivore, it doesn't actually seem like any of the Mycosins actually knew of his existence. People say that the vampires that actually met Malivore didn't actually live to tell the tale, but Malivore can't kill vampires. That's literally one of the main attributes of him. Or at least he can't actually absorb them, meaning that there are vampires that would have actually seen him, and very likely would have remembered him, because Malivore again can't absorb them because it would automatically begin to harm him, as he can't absorb any of the triad species, being vampires, werewolves, and witches. Meaning that there is no way that no vampire in Malivore's 900 years of existence, not a single vampire actually came across him or even heard about him. And not a single one of them actually works for Klaus or works for the Strix.
Why don't you pick on someone your own size? You, do your little blinky thing and get my girlfriend out of here. The kids need a chat.
What took you so long? Performance anxiety?
Well, I needed the proper motivation.
Oh, don't tell me it was what's-her-name being in danger that brought you out. You've gone soft.
It's actually exactly what Josie needed to let me loose. I'm here to put you down. Minus the boxing ring, of course. You up for a rematch?
Absolutely. Finally someone around here gets it. I mean, you being here proves my point. When it's time to fight, Josie has to rely on her strong half. That's like me.
Also, do you remember in the Vampire Diaries and the originals, whenever a witch channels, their power slowly drains out, especially after they do a very powerful spell? Yeah, that doesn't exist in Legacies because apparently Dark Josie has an unlimited power source, even though she isn't an original like Hope, and she isn't even a heretic. She just has dark power, and for some reason that dark magic was able to run endlessly. Even to the point in which it still made her powerful in season 4. That's not how it works. Even with siphoning, that's not how it works. Because we saw when Kai actually siphoned the entirety of the anti-magic barrier, it slowly ran out of his system. Like, it slowly left. In a few episodes, it was completely drained out. But Josie was able to keep it for a while. Bearing in mind, she was doing very powerful spells. That's not how channeling works. That's not how siphoning works. If that was the way that it actually works, then Freya should still have the power that she took from the ancestors in season 3, but she explicitly stated that she started to lose it. And eventually by the time that Marcel became a serum vampire, it was completely gone, because Freya used a large chunk of that power to actually revert Lucian. If the people that you're drawing from isn't actively giving you the power source, as in they constantly regenerate and then just give it back to you, your power source will start to drain when that doesn't happen. And witches would have to use their own energy to actually perform a spell. But again, for some reason, it just doesn't work for Josie.
I can't believe this is happening.
How are you here?
Oh, I got a little bit of a fight. But don't worry, I'll heal.
I hope you're the tribrid. I didn't think anything could hurt you bad enough to send you to limbo, much less...
I'm not dead, okay? I promise. I just got my ass kicked by a god to save our friends.
Whoa, there are gods now?
And finally, we have the off-slab dimensions, and this one is very, very egregious, mainly because it contradicts everything that we've ever learned about the off-slab dimensions within the Vampire Diaries and the originals. In fact, it contradicts a lot of scenes that we've actually seen in the verse. I'll start first with Limbo. Limbo was described as a place that the sun never rises, as in it's completely dark almost all the time. And it's also completely separate from Peace. There is also a gigantic river that separates it from Peace. So in the originals, when Hope met Haley, where the hell did they meet? We know full well that that was actually Haley because Haley knew something that Hope wouldn't have known and only Haley would have known about. And Haley called the place that she was at Peace. If it was Limbo, then why would she refer to it as Peace? And worst of all, why would she ever leave? Because Hope would have actually noticed that, oh, she's actually still at Limbo. But no, Hope believed that she's at Peace as well. Meaning that where Hope actually found her was Peace. And that makes no sense because how exactly did Hope ended up there? Hope isn't completely dead. You only go to Peace when you're completely dead. Also, how exactly did the spirits from the other side somehow ended up at Peace? They explained it by saying that they made a deal. Like, made a deal with who? The Furman? A lot of them are evil. Why would the Furman allow them to go through but didn't allow most of the people that were actually at Limbo who were probably more innocent than the witches that were on the other side? I mean, Esther and Dahlia ended up at Peace, somehow. That makes no sense. They're evil. How exactly is Dahlia and Esther more deserving of peace than teenagers? And if I bring up Peace, where exactly was Elena's body located? Because somehow Bonnie was able to get there and also Enzo. How was Enzo there? Was Enzo at Peace? Why would Elena be at Peace? She wasn't completely dead, she was only temporarily dead. And it can't be Limbo because there was actual sunlight. And if it's a place that only Bonnie could actually visit because Elena is locked in a separate dimension that only she actually exists in, then again, why was Enzo there? You might argue for Bonnie being there, but why would Enzo be there? Enzo isn't a witch. Enzo isn't a psychic. Enzo has no link to Elena. Also, speaking of the spirits, the Furman has to ferry across all of them. There is no way the Furman was able to ferry across every single spirit from the other side at the exact same time. There is no way that Cade wasn't able to grab a large chunk of them from Limbo and just take them to hell. Because the way that it sounded in season 5, it seems like they basically just teleported from the other side to Peace. Which doesn't make sense because you would have to go through the Furman. That's her literal job. But anyway, speaking of Legacies, I'm probably going to do a ranking for every single villain in Legacies, just like I did with the Vampire Diaries and the originals, so stay tuned for that.